The living room felt like a courtroom. My daughter Elena stood in the center, arms crossed, her posture rigid with self-righteousness. Her husband Travis stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder in a show of unity, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth that made my hands clench involuntarily. Around us, the rest of the family had gathered for what was supposed to be a celebration, Elena's promotion to senior manager at her marketing firm. My son Marcus was here with his wife. Elena's 2 kids were upstairs, mercifully shielded from what was about to happen. Even Travis's parents had come, sitting on the sectional sofa that I'd helped pay for 3 years ago. My name is Raymond Fischer, 71 years old, widower for 8 years, father to 2 children, grandfather to 4, and as of this moment, apparently a burden. "Dad," Elena said, and the room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at us. "We need to talk about your living situation." I'd known this was coming, had felt it building for weeks in the pointed comments, the meaningful glances between Elena and Travis, the way they'd started discussing household expenses in front of me with increasing emphasis. "All right," I said quietly, setting down my coffee cup. "You're 71 years old," she continued, as if I didn't know my own age. "You don't work anymore. You've been living here for 3 years, and Travis and I have been supporting you that entire time." "Supporting me," I repeated carefully. "Yes." She exchanged a look with Travis, who nodded encouragingly. "We pay all the bills, all the expenses, everything, and you contribute nothing." The word hung in the air like an accusation. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that hype button to boost this episode, or drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where you're all watching from. Marcus shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "Elena, maybe this isn't the time." "When is the time?" she snapped at her brother. "When we're bankrupting ourselves to support someone who won't even help out? Who just sits in his room reading and watching TV like he's on vacation?" "I do the grocery shopping," I offered quietly. "I cook dinner most nights. I help with the kids' homework." "That's not contributing," Travis interrupted, speaking for the first time. His voice had that condescending edge he always got when talking about money. "That's just existing. We're talking about actual financial contribution. Real money." Elena took a deep breath, like she was about to deliver a verdict. "So here's what we've decided," she said, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "You're old, you don't work, you contribute nothing financially. If you want to keep living here, you'll start paying us rent." The silence that followed was absolute. I stared at my daughter, at the woman I'd raised alone after her mother died when she was 16, at the person I'd worked double shifts for, sacrificed for, given everything to, and she was demanding I pay rent to live in my own house. Travis leaned forward, his smirk widening. "Consider it. Motivation. Maybe it'll inspire you to figure out how to actually contribute instead of just being dead weight." A few people in the room laughed. Nervous laughter, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Travis's father chuckled and said something about tough love. Elena's expression didn't change. Stern, righteous, convinced she was doing the right thing. I sat there, silent, humiliated, my heart breaking into pieces that I knew would never fit back together the same way. What they didn't know, what I'd been keeping secret for years, was that this entire confrontation was built on a lie I'd allowed to exist because I'd wanted my daughter to feel independent, successful, proud of herself. But that generosity, that kindness, had just been thrown back in my face, and it was about to cost her everything. 13 years ago, Elena had called me in tears. She was 25, newly married to Travis, working her first real job out of college. They'd been trying to buy their first house, a modest 3-bedroom in what they called an up-and-coming neighborhood, and had been denied for the mortgage. "Dad, I don't know what to do," she'd sobbed over the phone. "Travis's parents won't help us. They say we need to figure it out ourselves. But we can't get approved without a bigger down payment, and we've been saving for 2 years already." "How much do you need?" I'd asked. "Another $30,000. But Dad, we can't ask you for that. I know you're planning to retire soon." "How much is the house?" I'd interrupted. $280,000. But Dad, I'll co-sign the loan, I'd said, and I'll cover the additional down payment. The silence on the other end had lasted so long I'd thought the call had dropped. "Dad, that's too much. I can't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask," I told her gently. "I offered. You're my daughter. I want you to have a home, to build a life. Let me help." She'd cried again, but these were different tears. Grateful tears. "I'll pay you back," she'd promised. "Every penny, I swear." "Just be happy," I'd said. "That's all the payment I need." The house had closed a month later. Elena and Travis had moved in, posted pictures on social media showing off their first home, celebrated with friends. Travis's parents had even showed up to the housewarming party, bragging about their son's success. No one mentioned that I'd made it possible. No one mentioned the $30,000 or the co-signed loan that had required me to put my own financial security at risk. I hadn't wanted the recognition. I just wanted my daughter to be happy. The down payment was just the beginning. 2 years after they'd bought the house, Elena had lost her job during a company restructuring. She'd been out of work for 7 months, a devastating stretch during which their savings had evaporated and their credit card debt had mounted. I remembered the night she'd called me, sobbing, saying they'd received a foreclosure notice. Travis had been yelling in the background, blaming her for not networking enough to find a new position faster. The stress had been eating their marriage from the inside. "Dad, I don't know what to do," she'd said through tears. "We're going to lose the house, everything we've built." "How much do you need?" I'd asked, already pulling up my bank account on the computer. "Just for this month's mortgage, $1,850. But Dad, we have 6 more months until my unemployment benefits run out, and Travis says his salary alone isn't enough." "I'll cover it," I'd interrupted. "All 7 months if needed. However long it takes you to find something." "Dad, that's over $10,000. I can't ask you for that." "You're not asking," I'd said. "I'm offering. You're my daughter. I'm not going to let you lose your home." The relief in her voice had been palpable. "I'll pay you back, I promise. Every cent. Once I'm working again." "We'll figure it out," I'd said, knowing even then that repayment would never come, not because she was malicious, but because once the crisis passed, the memory of desperation would fade, replaced by the comfortable narrative that they'd gotten through it on their own. I'd covered 7 months of mortgage payments, $12,950 total. I'd kept meticulous records, dates, amounts, confirmation numbers, not because I planned to demand repayment, but because I'd learned long ago to document everything, just in case. When Elena had finally landed a position, better than her previous one actually, with a significant raise, they'd thrown a celebration dinner, invited friends and family to toast her success. Travis had given a speech about their resilience and determination, about how they'd weathered the storm together. I'd been there, sitting at the end of the table, applauding along with everyone else. No one had mentioned the $12,950 that had saved their home. No one had toasted the father who'd made their resilience possible. Elena had hugged me at the end of the night and whispered, "Thanks for believing in me, Dad." Which was something, but it wasn't acknowledgement of the concrete financial salvation I'd provided. I'd gone home that night and added the payment records to my folder of documents, just in case. 3 years ago, Travis had wanted to buy a new car. Not a used car, not a practical sedan. A luxury SUV that cost $62,000. They couldn't afford it, not with their existing car payment and the credit card debt they still carried from Elena's unemployment. But Travis had been insistent. His colleagues all drove nice cars. He was in sales, he'd argued, and image mattered. He needed to look successful to be successful. Elena had called me asking for advice. "Should we do it?" she'd asked. "Travis says it's an investment in his career, but the payments would be almost $900 a month." "Can you afford $900 a month?" I'd asked. "If we're careful, if we cut back on other things, maybe skip the vacation this year, maybe I take my lunch to work instead of eating out." "Elena," I'd said carefully, "a car that requires you to skip vacations and scrimp on daily expenses isn't a car you can afford." "But Travis is thinking about appearances," I'd said, "not about your financial health." She'd been quiet for a moment. "You think it's a bad idea?" "I think it's a decision you need to make carefully. But yes, if you're asking my opinion, I think adding a $900 monthly payment on top of your existing obligations is risky." They'd bought the car anyway, and 6 months later, when they'd overextended themselves and were struggling to make all their payments, Travis had made a comment at a family dinner. "Must be nice to be retired and not have to worry about bills." I'd bitten my tongue and said nothing. 4 years ago, they'd decided they needed renovations. The kitchen was dated. The bathrooms were embarrassing. The backyard needed proper landscaping. Elena had shown me Pinterest boards full of inspiration photos, marble countertops, rainfall shower heads, outdoor kitchens with built-in grills. The estimates had come in at $75,000. "We can't afford this," Elena had told me over coffee at a cafe near her office. "But we also can't live in a house that looks like it's stuck in 1995. It's affecting our mental health, Dad, coming home every day to this outdated space. All our friends have these beautiful, modern homes, and ours is just embarrassing." I'd looked at the photos she'd shown me of their current house. It wasn't stuck in 1995. It was a perfectly nice, functional home with appliances that worked and bathrooms that were clean. The only thing wrong with it was that it didn't look like a magazine spread. "The house is fine," I'd said gently. "It's in good condition. Everything works." "But it's not impressive," Elena had said, and there it was, the real issue. "When people come over, I feel like I have to apologize for how it looks. Travis's parents have this gorgeous house, and his brother just renovated, and we're the only ones who look like we can't afford to keep up." "Elena, honey, you're comparing yourself to people who are at different stages of life, with different financial situations. Can you help us or not?" she'd asked, suddenly sharp. "I'm not asking you to pay for all of it. Just some of it. Enough that we can do the major pieces." I should have said no. Should have held firm on the principle that cosmetic renovations they couldn't afford were luxuries, not necessities. But I'd seen the desperation in her eyes, the need to feel successful, to look successful, to prove something I didn't fully understand. "I can contribute $40,000, I'd said. "But Elena, this has to be the last time. I'm 71 years old. I'm not going to have money to keep bailing you out forever." She'd hugged me so tight I'd felt tears on my shoulder. "You're the best father anyone could ask for," she'd whispered. "I promise. This is it. After this, we'll be stable. We won't need to ask again." The renovations had taken 3 months and, predictably, had gone over budget. The final cost had been $82,000. Elena and Travis had covered $42,000 by maxing out credit cards and taking a personal loan from Travis's parents. The result was beautiful, I had to admit. Sleek modern kitchen with an island and high-end appliances. Spa-like bathrooms with heated floors. Professionally landscaped backyard with a pergola and outdoor seating area. Elena had posted endless photos on social media. Staged shots of the kitchen at sunset. Videos walking through the renovated spaces. Captions about their investment in their home and their commitment to quality living. I'd scrolled through the posts one evening, looking for any mention of the contribution that had made it possible, looking for any acknowledgement, even oblique, that they'd had help. Nothing. Every post was about our renovation journey and what we built together, and so proud of what we've accomplished. I'd never been tagged, never been mentioned. The $40,000 might as well have never existed. I'd closed the social media app and added the renovation receipts to my folder, just in case. Beyond the money, there had been smaller cruelties. The kind that hurt more because they spoke to how Elena and Travis saw me, not as a person deserving respect, but as an obligation to be managed. 2 years ago, they'd hosted a dinner party for Travis's work colleagues. Important people, Travis had stressed. His boss, a few senior sales managers, potentially crucial networking connections. I'd offered to stay in my room for the evening to give them space. Elena had seemed relieved. "That's probably best, Dad," she'd said. "These people are very particular. Very image conscious. And you know how Travis gets when he's trying to impress his work people." I'd understood the subtext. My presence would be embarrassing. An elderly father living with them didn't fit the successful, dynamic image they wanted to project. I'd stayed in my room that evening, listening to the sounds of laughter and conversation from above, feeling like a secret they were keeping. At one point, I'd emerged to get a glass of water from the kitchen. The dinner party was in the dining room, visible from the kitchen. Travis had seen me and his eyes had gone wide with panic. He'd quickly stepped into the kitchen, blocking me from view. "Ray," he'd said in a harsh whisper, "what are you doing? I thought you were staying in your room." "I just needed water," I'd said. "Well, get it quickly and get back downstairs. If my boss sees you, just please, this is really important to me." I'd gotten my water and retreated, feeling like a burden, like something to be hidden away. 18 months ago, my grandson, Elena's son, Jackson, had asked if I could come to his school's Grandparents' Day. "Grandpa, you can come to my class and we do activities and you can meet my teacher and my friends," he'd said excitedly. "Will you come?" "I'd love to," I'd said. But when Elena found out, she'd pulled me aside. "Dad, about Grandparents' Day," she'd said. "Travis's parents are already going, and I think it might be confusing for Jackson to have 3 grandparents there. It might seem like we're trying to show off or something." "I'm his grandfather," I'd said. "Why would it be showing off for me to attend?" "It's just Travis's parents are very involved. They donate to the school, they're on committees, and if you're also there and you're just there, not on any committees or anything, it might look strange." "Strange," I'd repeated. "You know what I mean? People might wonder why you're there but not involved the way Travis's parents are. It might raise questions about our family dynamic." Translation. Travis's parents had money and status. I was just the old man living in their house. I'd told Jackson I couldn't make it after all. His disappointment had been crushing. 1 year ago, Elena's birthday. She'd wanted to celebrate with a dinner at an expensive restaurant, the kind with a dress code and a wine list that required a sommelier to navigate. I'd asked if I should join them. "Oh, Dad," she'd said, in that tone that was trying to sound casual but wasn't. "It's going to be adults only. Just me and Travis and a few friends. Nothing against you, but it's going to be very loud, very late. Not really your scene." "I can handle loud and late," I'd said. "I know, but I don't know. I just want this one night to be about me and my friends, without having to worry about, you know." "Worry about what?" She'd looked uncomfortable. "About making sure you're having a good time, about whether the food is too fancy, about whether you're following the conversation. It's just easier if it's just us." I hadn't pushed. Had said that was fine, that I understood. I'd spent her birthday evening alone in my room, eating leftover pasta, while she'd posted Instagram stories from the restaurant, group shots with friends, close-ups of expensive dishes, videos of champagne toasts. Not a single message from her acknowledging that it was her birthday and I wasn't there. Not a single thought that maybe her father might have liked to celebrate with her. These weren't financial betrayals. They were something worse, the slow erosion of dignity, the steady message that I was less than, that I was an embarrassment, that I was someone to be managed and hidden, not included and valued. I'd documented none of these incidents in my folder. You can't file a receipt for disrespect. You can't keep a paper trail of being made to feel small, but I'd remembered all of them, every single one. 8 years ago, my wife Patricia had died of lung cancer. The diagnosis had come fast, a routine checkup revealing shadows on her lungs that turned out to be stage 4 cancer. The decline had been faster, 6 months from diagnosis to death, and suddenly I was alone in the house we'd shared for 43 years. Patricia and I had built a life together in that house. It was a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, but it was ours. We'd painted every room ourselves. We'd planted the garden in the backyard, watched it grow over decades. We'd raised Elena there, celebrated every holiday, hosted every birthday party. After she died, the house felt enormous and empty. Every room held memories that hurt to remember and hurt to forget. The bedroom where she'd spent her final weeks, the kitchen where she'd cooked thousands of meals, the living room where we'd spent countless evenings together, reading, talking, just being. I'd tried to stay there. I'd maintained the routines, watered Patricia's plants, kept the house clean, made myself dinner every evening at 6 o'clock the way we'd always done together. But grief is a heavy companion, and the house magnified my loneliness until it felt unbearable. 6 months after Patricia died, Elena had visited me for the first time in weeks. She'd been busy with her own life, her own family, her own grief. But that day, she'd come over and found me in the kitchen, staring at a pot of soup I'd made for one, and she'd seen something in my face that had concerned her. "Dad," she'd said gently, "you can't keep living like this. This house is too big for one person. It's too full of memories. You're drowning here." "I'm managing," I'd said. "You're surviving," she'd corrected. "That's not the same thing. Dad, come live with us, just temporarily until you figure out what you want to do. We have the downstairs bedroom with the attached bathroom. It's perfect for you, and the kids barely know their grandfather. It would be good for them to have you around." It had seemed like a kindness, like genuine concern for my well-being, like a daughter who wanted to take care of her father the way he'd taken care of her. "Are you sure?" I'd asked. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," she'd said firmly. "You're family. That's what family does. We take care of each other." I'd sold my house, the one Patricia and I had bought when Elena was 2, the one we'd filled with 40 years of memories and milestones. The market was good, and I'd sold it for a decent price, $340,000, which I'd added to my investment accounts. I'd moved into Elena's house with 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of photos, and my folder of important documents. Everything else, furniture, dishes, Patricia's clothes, 40 years of accumulated possessions, I'd donated or sold or given away. "Just temporarily," Elena had said, "until you figure out what you want." That was 8 years ago. For the first 2 years, it had been genuinely good. I'd been helpful, picking up the kids from school when Elena was working late, preparing dinner several nights a week, handling grocery shopping and small repairs around the house. I'd been the grandfather Jackson and Sophia had barely known, suddenly present for homework help and bedtime stories. Jackson had been 7 then, Sophia 5. They'd adjusted to having Grandpa living downstairs quickly, treating it as normal. Jackson would knock on my door in the mornings, asking if I wanted to eat breakfast with him. Sophia would bring me drawings she'd made at school, asking me to hang them on my walls. I'd felt useful, needed, like I had a purpose beyond just existing. Travis hadn't been thrilled about my presence, but he'd been polite enough in the beginning. He'd thank me for picking up the kids, for making dinner, for handling errands. He'd make jokes about having a live-in handyman that were supposed to be lighthearted but had an edge I couldn't quite ignore. Elena had seemed happier with me there. She'd been grieving her mother too, I'd realized. Having me in the house meant having a connection to Patricia, to our family history, to the years before she'd built her own life. But somewhere around year 3, things had shifted. Travis got a promotion at work. Regional sales manager, more money, more pressure, more expectation that he'd live a certain lifestyle. He'd started comparing himself to his colleagues, to his brother who was in finance, to some idealized version of success that required constant striving and displaying. And I, apparently, didn't fit that image. The comments had started subtly. Offhand remarks about how crowded the house felt with 3 adults. Mentions of how the downstairs bedroom would make a perfect home office if it weren't occupied. Suggestions that I might enjoy a retirement community where there were activities and people my own age. Elena had started treating me differently too, less like her father, more like a responsibility she'd taken on and was starting to resent. She stopped asking my opinion on things, stopped including me in family decisions. When they'd planned vacations, I hadn't been invited. "It's just going to be the 4 of us, Dad. Family time." As if I wasn't family. When they had people over, I'd been expected to stay in my room. "Just for tonight, Dad. These are Travis's work colleagues, and it's important we make a good impression." When Jackson had activities, school plays, soccer games, parent-teacher conferences, I'd been told I didn't need to come. "Travis's parents are already going. It'll be too many people." I'd gone from helpful family member to inconvenient lodger in the space of a few years. And the comments about money had started. "It must be nice to be retired and not have bills." Some of us are still working to support this household. Retirement means you just get to coast while the rest of us carry the load. Never directly accusing me of not paying my way, never explicitly demanding money, just constant implications that I was taking advantage, that I was a burden, that my presence was costly. I'd offered multiple times to contribute to expenses. Had suggested paying for groceries or utilities or something. Elena had always waved it off. "Don't be ridiculous, Dad. You're family. We're not going to charge you rent." But the resentment had continued to build anyway. The unspoken ledger of what my presence cost them compared to what I contributed had apparently been growing in their minds even without my financial participation. And through all of this, I'd kept my secret. Kept the truth that this house they resented me living in was actually still half mine, that the mortgage they complained about paying was being paid from an account in my name, that the property they saw as their burden was legally my property. I'd kept the secret because I'd wanted them to have the pride of ownership, the sense of accomplishment, the independence. But that generosity had been interpreted as weakness, as dependence, as me needing them rather than them needing me. The year before the confrontation had been particularly bad. Travis's resentment had evolved from passive-aggressive comments to open hostility. He'd started calculating, loudly, in front of me, how much my presence cost them monthly. "Let's see," he'd said one evening while reviewing their budget on his laptop at the kitchen table. "An extra person means probably $200 more in groceries per month, maybe $50 extra in water and electricity. Insurance goes up with another person in the house. We're probably looking at $400, $500 per month just for you being here, Ray." "I'm happy to contribute," I'd started. "Too late for that now," he'd interrupted. "We've been covering it for 7 years. That's like $35,000. Oh, Jesus, we could have taken some nice vacations with that money." Elena had been there, but hadn't defended me. Hadn't pointed out that without the $40,000 I'd given them for renovations, they wouldn't have the nice house they were complaining about me living in. Hadn't mentioned the mortgage payments I'd covered, or the down payment, or any of it. She just looked uncomfortable and changed the subject. The kids had started picking up on the tension. Jackson, now 14, had become quieter around me. Sophia, 12, had stopped bringing me her drawings. They'd sensed that Grandpa was a source of conflict between their parents, and they'd responded by creating distance. 6 months before the confrontation, Travis's parents had visited. Barbara and Frank Fischer, wealthy, successful, the kind of people who owned a vacation home and drove luxury cars and never let you forget it. They'd been polite to me, barely. Mostly they'd ignored my existence while praising Elena and Travis's beautiful home, their successful careers, their wonderful children. At dinner that night, Barbara had asked, in front of everyone, "So Raymond, how long are you planning to stay with Elena and Travis? Don't you think it's time to find your own place?" The implication had been clear. You've overstayed your welcome. I'd looked at Elena, waiting for her to say something, to defend me, or at least to soften her mother-in-law's rudeness. She'd said nothing, had just moved food around on her plate. Travis had answered for me. "We've been discussing that, actually. There are some really nice senior communities nearby, much more appropriate for someone Dad's age." "Well, that sounds wonderful," Barbara had said. "Having your own space again, Raymond, independence. It must be hard living in someone else's home at your age." Someone else's home. I'd excused myself from dinner early that night and gone to my room, sat on my bed and pulled out the folder I kept in my closet, looked at the deed with my name on it, at the mortgage documents, at all the proof that this someone else's home was actually mine. I'd called my attorney that night. "Doug," I'd said, "I need to prepare for something. I need documentation of ownership. I need to know my options if they try to force me out." "Ray, are things getting that bad?" he'd asked. "Yes," I'd said simply. "All right. Let me prepare everything. If this escalates, we'll be ready." 3 months before the confrontation, Elena had sat me down for a talk. "Dad," she'd said, her voice taking on that tone people use when they are about to say something difficult, "Travis and I have been talking about your living situation." "I see," I'd said. "It's been 8 years, which is wonderful. We've loved having you here. But Dad, you're 71 now, and we think it might be time for you to consider other options." Other options. A retirement community, or maybe a small apartment nearby. Somewhere that's yours, where you can have independence, where you don't have to feel like you're living in someone else's space. "I don't feel that way," I'd said quietly. "But you should have your own place," she'd continued, "your own life. And Dad, honestly, Travis and I are at a point where we need that room. Sophia's getting older, and she needs more space. We're thinking of converting the downstairs into a suite for her. So you want me to move out?" "We want you to have options," she'd corrected. "We want you to be happy, and we don't think living here long-term is the right situation anymore." "Because I'm a burden," I'd said. "Because it's been 8 years, and it was only supposed to be temporary," she'd said, not denying the burden part. I'd looked at my daughter, at the woman I'd raised, supported, sacrificed for, and realized that she genuinely believed she was being reasonable, that 8 years of providing me shelter somehow balanced out 13 years of me saving her house, her credit, her financial life. "I'll think about it," I'd said. "Good," she'd replied, seeming relieved. "And Dad, maybe start looking at places. Get a sense of what's out there. We're not kicking you out, but we do need to have a timeline. A timeline for moving out of my own house." The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. What none of them knew, what I'd deliberately never told them, was the truth about the house they lived in. When I'd co-signed their loan 13 years ago, I hadn't just co-signed. I'd structured the loan in a specific way with my attorney's help. The deed had been put in both our names, mine and Elena's. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. The mortgage had been set up the same way. Both of us responsible, both of us on the paperwork. But after Patricia died and I'd moved in, we'd talked about transferring the house fully into Elena's name. She'd wanted it for estate planning reasons, for the feeling of full ownership, for the independence of it. I'd agreed immediately, had my attorney draw up the transfer documents. Simple paperwork that would remove my name from the deed and the mortgage, making Elena the sole owner. But the paperwork had required both of us to sign in front of a notary. Elena had signed her portion, I'd signed mine. But she'd never returned the final notarized forms to my attorney. She'd gotten busy with work, with the kids, with life. The documents had sat in a folder somewhere in her home office, forgotten. And I'd never pushed her to complete the process because it hadn't seemed urgent. So legally, technically, officially, I still owned half the house. My name was still on the deed, still on the mortgage, still on every official document. The mortgage payments that Travis thought he was paying, they were being auto-debited from my account, the joint account Elena and I had set up 13 years ago when we'd bought the house. Travis had been transferring money into that account every month, but he'd assumed it was their account. It wasn't. It was mine and Elena's. The property taxes, paid from the same account. The homeowner's insurance, same account. Every single official document related to this house had my name on it, not Travis's. Travis had been living in a house he didn't own, making payments into an account he didn't control, building equity he didn't have any legal claim to, and Elena had forgotten the one crucial step that would have changed all of that. I'd kept this secret not out of malice, but out of kindness. I'd wanted them to feel like this was their home, their space, their achievement. I'd never wanted to hold it over them or make them feel like they owed me anything. But that generosity had been mistaken for weakness. And now, standing in this living room, being told I was old and useless and needed to pay rent to stay in my own house, that generosity was officially over. After Elena's announcement about rent, after Travis's motivation comment, after the uncomfortable laughter from family members who didn't know what else to do, I'd excused myself. "I need some air," I'd said quietly, standing up from the chair I'd been sitting in. "Dad?" Marcus had started to say something, but I'd held up a hand. "It's fine," I'd told him. "I just need a moment." I'd walked out of the living room, past the renovated kitchen that my money had paid for, past the framed photos on the walls showing a happy family that apparently didn't include me anymore, and into the downstairs bedroom that had been mine for 8 years. I'd sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, breathing slowly, letting the humiliation and hurt wash over me. Then I'd opened the closet and pulled out the folder. It was a simple accordion folder, the kind you can buy at any office supply store. Inside were documents I'd kept organized and updated, just in case. The original deed to the house. Both names clearly visible. Raymond Fischer and Elena Martinez Fischer. The mortgage documents, same names. The property tax receipts for the last 13 years. All paid from the joint account in my name. The homeowner's insurance policies. Primary policyholder, Raymond Fischer. The transfer documents that had never been completed, signed by both of us, but never notarized and filed. And one more document. A letter from my attorney, dated 3 months ago, outlining my legal rights and options regarding the property. I'd asked him to prepare it when I'd first started feeling the shift in how Elena and Travis were treating me, when the jokes had become less funny and more pointed, when I'd started to suspect that they saw me as temporary, disposable, a problem to be solved. I'd hoped I'd never need to use these documents. But hope and reality don't always align. I'd picked up my phone and called my attorney, Douglas Whitmore. It was Saturday evening, but Doug had told me to call any time if the situation escalated. "Doug," I'd said when he answered. "It's Ray. It's time." "They actually did it?" he'd asked. "They actually demanded rent?" "Worse. They did it in front of the entire family, called me old and useless, said I contribute nothing, told me I need to start paying them to live here." Doug had been quiet for a moment. "Ray, I'm sorry. I'd hoped they'd have more sense than that." "So had I." "Are you sure you want to do this? Once we file the paperwork, there's no going back. Your relationship with your daughter will be permanently changed." "Doug," I'd said, looking at the folder full of documents, at the proof of years of sacrifice and generosity that had been dismissed as nothing, "it's already permanently changed. They changed it. I'm just responding to reality." "All right then," he'd said, his voice becoming crisp and professional. "I'll file the ownership confirmation documents first thing Monday morning. I'll also prepare a notice of rent due. Since you're the actual owner and their residents, they technically owe you rent. Market rate for a 4-bedroom house in that neighborhood is about $3,200 per month." "They wanted me to pay rent," I'd said quietly. "Fair is fair." "I'll also prepare eviction paperwork, just in case. 60-day notice, as required by state law. We'll have everything ready." "Thank you, Doug." "Ray," he'd said before hanging up, "for what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. You don't owe them your dignity." The rest of that Saturday had been excruciating. The family gathering had dissolved awkwardly after my absence stretched past 15 minutes. People had made excuses about needing to leave, about early mornings, about prior commitments. Marcus had knocked on my door before leaving. "Dad," he'd said through the wood, "that was wrong, what Elena did. I'm sorry." "It's not your fault," I'd told him. "Still, if you need anything, if you need a place to stay, you can come to us. Sarah and I have the guest room." "I appreciate that, son. But I'll be fine." He'd hesitated, then said quietly, "Elena's scared, I think, of getting old herself, of becoming what she thinks you are. That doesn't excuse it, but I thought you should know." I hadn't responded. After a moment, I'd heard him walk away. That night, Elena had knocked on my door. "Dad?" Her voice had been smaller than it had been earlier, less certain. "Can we talk?" "Not tonight," I'd said. "But not tonight, Elena." She'd waited outside my door for almost a minute before finally walking away. Sunday had been worse. The house had been filled with a tension so thick you could practically see it. Elena and Travis had stayed in their bedroom most of the morning, having what sounded like an intense discussion. The kids had been confused, asking their mother why Grandpa was upset, why he wouldn't come out of his room. I'd spent the day organizing my documents, packing a bag with essentials just in case things got ugly quickly, and calling my son Marcus to have a backup plan. I'm going to need you to trust me, I'd told him. Things are going to get complicated very fast, probably by Monday afternoon. Just know that I'm not being cruel, I'm being fair. Dad, what are you planning? Justice, I'd said simply. Sunday night, Elena had tried again. Dad, please, we need to talk about yesterday. I think maybe we came on too strong. Travis and I have been stressed about money and we just... Monday, I'd interrupted. We'll talk Monday, after some paperwork is filed. Paperwork? What paperwork? I hadn't answered. She'd stood outside my door for several minutes, but I'd remained silent, and eventually she'd left. Monday morning, Elena and Travis had both gone to work. The kids had gone to school. The house had been empty, except for me. I'd spent the morning in the living room, drinking coffee, waiting. Doug had texted me at 10:47 a.m., documents filed, courier dispatched, should arrive by 11:30. At 11:28 a.m., I'd heard Elena's car pull into the driveway. She'd come home for lunch, something she did occasionally when working from home in the afternoon. She'd walked in through the front door, still on her phone, laughing at something a colleague was saying. At 11:31 a.m., there'd been a knock. Elena had looked at me, surprised I was sitting in the living room. Were you expecting someone? I hadn't answered. She'd opened the door to find a professional courier holding a large manila envelope. Elena Martinez Fischer? He'd asked. Yes? I have legal documents for you. I need you to sign for receipt. Her face had gone confused, then concerned. Legal documents? From who? The sender information is on the envelope, he'd said politely but professionally. She'd signed for the envelope, closed the door, and stood in the entryway staring at it. Dad, do you know what this is? She'd asked, turning to me. Open it, I'd said calmly. Her hands had trembled slightly as she'd torn open the envelope and pulled out the papers inside. I'd watched her face as she read, watched confusion turn to shock, turn to disbelief, turn to something that might have been fear. Dad! Her voice had come out barely above a whisper. What is this? The documents were clear and comprehensive. Notice of ownership. Official confirmation that Raymond Fischer is the legal co-owner of the property located at 847 Thornwood Drive, with his name appearing on the deed, mortgage, and all relevant legal documents. Notice of incomplete transfer documentation showing that while transfer papers were initiated 8 years ago, they were never completed or filed, leaving Raymond Fischer as legal co-owner. Notice of rent due. As the legal co-owner of the property, Raymond Fischer is entitled to fair market rent from all non-owner residents. Effective immediately, residents Elena Martinez Fischer and Travis Fischer owe monthly rent of $1,600 each, total $3,200 for continued occupancy. Notice of payment history. Documentation showing that mortgage payments, property taxes, and insurance have been paid from Raymond Fischer's account for the duration of the mortgage. At the bottom of each document, my signature, not hers. This has to be a mistake, Elena had said, flipping through the pages frantically. This is our house. We bought it. We've been making the payments. You've been transferring money into the joint account that I set up when we bought the house, I'd said quietly. But the account is in my name. The deed is in my name. The mortgage is in my name. You never completed the transfer paperwork, Elena. But we signed it. We signed the transfer papers. You signed them, I'd confirmed. But you never returned them to Doug to be notarized and filed. They've been sitting in your office for 8 years. She'd stared at me, the papers shaking in her hands. So, you're saying... Her voice had cracked. You're saying this isn't our house. It's my house, I'd said. That I've allowed you to live in rent-free for 13 years. That I've paid the down payment for. That I've covered the mortgage on when you were unemployed. That I've funded renovations for. My house. No. She'd shaken her head. No, that's not... Dad, you can't do this. Do what? I'd asked. Clarify ownership of my own property? Charge rent to people who've been living here rent-free? That seems fair, doesn't it? Especially since you told me I needed to start paying you rent. The door had opened again. Travis, home early from work, probably because Elena had called him in a panic. What the hell is going on? He'd demanded, striding into the entryway. Elena had thrust the papers at him. Read it. I'd watched Travis read. Watched his face go through the same progression Elena's had. Watched the reality hit him like a physical blow. This has to be a mistake, he'd said, but his voice lacked conviction. We own this house. We've been making payments for 13 years. Into my account, I'd said, on my mortgage, for my house. You son of a bitch, Travis had whispered. Travis, Elena had started. He's been sitting on this the whole time, Travis had shouted, letting us think this was our house, letting us renovate, letting us build our lives here, and all along he's had this trump card ready. I had nothing ready, I'd said, my voice still calm despite the rage I felt building. I wanted this to be your house. I wanted you to have the independence and pride of ownership, but you never filed the paperwork. And then yesterday, you decided that I was old and useless and needed to pay rent to live in my own home. This is insane, Travis had said, pacing now. You can't charge us rent. We have kids, we have jobs, we've been living here for over a decade. 13 years, I'd corrected. Rent-free. But that's ending now. Market rate is $3,200 per month. First month's rent is due by the end of this week. We can't afford that. Elena's voice had risen to a near scream. Our budget doesn't work with an extra $3,200 per month. That's on top of what we're already paying into the mortgage account. The payments you make into the mortgage account are my business, I'd said. They're paying down my mortgage, on my house. The rent is separate. So you want us to pay the mortgage and rent? Travis had looked like he was going to have a stroke. That's over $5,000 a month just for housing. Or, I'd said quietly, you could move out. Within 2 hours, my phone had exploded. 18 missed calls from Elena, 7 from Travis, 3 from Travis's mother, 2 from Elena's brother Marcus. Even one from Elena's former college roommate somehow dragged into this mess. I'd ignored them all. The voicemails had ranged from desperate to angry to threatening. Elena, message 4. Dad, please pick up. Please. We need to talk about this. There has to be a solution. I'm sorry about what I said. I was stressed and I didn't mean it. Please call me back. Travis, message 2. Listen, old man. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this is going to backfire on you. You're about to destroy your relationship with your daughter, with your grandkids. Is that really what you want? Call me back so we can discuss this like adults. Travis's mother, message 1. Raymond, this is Barbara Fischer. I don't know what's gotten into you, but demanding rent from your own daughter is unconscionable. They've taken care of you for years, and this is how you repay them? I suggest you reconsider before you do permanent damage to this family. I deleted them all without listening past the first few seconds. The text messages had been even more frantic. Elena, Dad, please. I'm begging you. We can't afford this. Elena, I said I was sorry. What more do you want from me? Travis, this is financial abuse. We're documenting everything. Travis, you're going to regret this. Elena, think about the kids. They're going to lose their home because you're angry at me. Travis, my parents are willing to mediate. Can we at least talk? Elena, Dad, please answer me. I'd read them all, hadn't responded to a single one. Around 6 p.m., there'd been a knock at my bedroom door. Dad? Elena's voice had been hoarse from crying. Can I please come in? I'd opened the door. She'd looked terrible, eyes red and swollen, makeup smeared, hair disheveled. Behind her in the hallway, Travis had stood with his arms crossed, his jaw tight. Can we talk? She'd asked. Please? Come in, I'd said, stepping aside. They'd entered my room, the guest room in their house, except it wasn't their house, and stood awkwardly near the door. Dad, I'm sorry. Elena had started immediately. I'm so sorry for what I said Saturday. I was wrong. It was cruel and unfair, and I didn't mean it. You said it in front of the entire family, I'd said quietly. You made sure everyone heard that I was old and useless and contributing nothing. I know, and I regret it so much. I was stressed about money, about work, about everything, and I took it out on you. But Dad, you can't do this. You can't charge us rent. We can't afford it. Then move out, I'd said simply. This is our home. Travis had exploded. We've lived here for 13 years. We've made it ours. You can't just kick us out because your feelings got hurt. I'm not kicking you out, I'd said. I'm charging you fair market rent for the house you live in, the house I own. You have every right to stay, as tenants who pay rent. We already pay the mortgage, Travis had shouted. You pay into the mortgage account, I'd corrected, which reduces my debt on my property. That's not the same as rent. This is insane. Travis, Elena had said, putting a hand on his arm. Then to me, Dad, please, can we work something out? Maybe a lower amount? Maybe we could do $1,000 a month? That we could maybe manage if we cut back on other things. Market rate is $3,200, I'd said. I could rent this house to strangers for that amount tomorrow. Why would I give you a discount? Because I'm your daughter, she'd cried. And you told me I was old and useless and needed to pay you to live in my own house, I'd replied. So which family relationship are we honoring here, Elena? The one where I'm your father who deserves respect? Or the one where I'm a burden who needs to earn his place? She'd started crying again. Dad, please, think about the kids. If we have to move, we'll have to pull them out of their school, away from their friends. They'll lose everything familiar. They'll survive, I'd said. Children are resilient. You survived when your mother died. They'll survive changing schools. It was harsh. I'd known it was harsh, but I'd been done being soft. You're really going to do this, Travis had said. You're really going to destroy your own family over this. I didn't destroy anything, I'd said. I built it. I paid for it. I supported it. And you destroyed whatever relationship we had when you decided I was worthless. 2 days later, they'd staged an intervention. I'd come home from a doctor's appointment to find the living room full of people, Elena and Travis, Marcus and his wife Sarah, Travis's parents, even the pastor from Elena's church that she attended twice a year. Dad, Marcus had said, standing up when I'd entered. We need to talk. All of us. This looks like an ambush, I'd observed. It's an intervention, Travis's mother Barbara had said. We're all here because we're concerned about your behavior. I'd almost laughed. My behavior? Raymond, the pastor had started, clearly uncomfortable with being dragged into this. I understand there's been a conflict in the family. Elena and Travis have shared their concerns, and I wanted to offer some perspective on forgiveness and family unity. Did they tell you what they said to me? I'd interrupted. Did they share that part? The pastor had looked at Elena, who'd looked at the floor. They may have been harsh, the pastor had conceded, but responding with financial punishment seems contrary to the spirit of, I'm not punishing anyone, I'd said. I'm charging rent for my property. That's not punishment. That's basic economics. You're being vindictive, Travis's father had said. You're using a legal technicality to hurt them. A technicality? I'd repeated. The fact that I own the house they live in is a technicality? You know what I mean, he'd said. They thought this was their house. You let them think that, and now you're pulling the rug out from under them. They demanded I pay them rent, I'd said slowly, looking at each person in the room. In my own house. They called me old and useless. They said I contributed nothing. They did this in front of the entire family, deliberately humiliating me, and now you're all here telling me that I'm the problem? Nobody's saying what they did was right, Sarah had said gently. But Dad, this reaction, charging them rent they can't afford, it's going to destroy your relationship with Elena, with your grandchildren. My relationship with Elena was destroyed the moment she decided to treat me like garbage, I'd said. Everything else is just paperwork. So that's it? Marcus had asked. You're just going to let this family fall apart? I didn't let anything fall apart, I'd said. I held it together for decades. I sacrificed for it. I gave everything to it. And the moment I stopped being useful, I was told to pay rent or get out. So now they know what that feels like. This isn't Christian, the pastor had tried. Forgiveness is... I'll forgive them when they actually apologize, I'd interrupted. Not this sorry you got upset nonsense. A real apology. An acknowledgement of what they did and why it was wrong. Until then, the rent stands. 7 days after serving the notice, Elena and Travis had shown up at my door together. It was Saturday morning. I'd been reading in the living room, drinking coffee, enjoying the quiet before the inevitable confrontation. When I'd opened the door, I'd seen immediately that something had changed. Elena's eyes were red but dry. Travis looked defeated, his usual arrogance completely absent. Can we come in? Elena had asked quietly. I'd stepped aside. They'd sat on the couch, the one I'd helped them buy when they'd first moved in. I'd taken the armchair across from them. We can't pay the rent, Elena had said without preamble. We've gone through our finances 50 times. We've cut everything we can cut, and we still can't make it work. So what are you going to do? I'd asked. We're going to move, Travis had said, and I'd heard the bitterness in his voice. We found an apartment in a cheaper neighborhood. 2 bedrooms. The kids will have to share. We'll have to move them to a different school district. I'll have a longer commute. We'll have to sell most of our furniture because it won't fit. I'm sorry to hear that, I'd said, and I'd meant it. Not sorry enough to change my mind, but sorry nonetheless. Are you? Elena had asked, and there was no anger in her voice. Just exhaustion. Are you really sorry, Dad? Or is this exactly what you wanted? I wanted respect, I'd said quietly. I wanted to be treated like a father, not a burden. I wanted my years of sacrifice to mean something. That's what I wanted. We know we hurt you, she'd said. We know what we said was wrong. Do you? I'd asked. because your apologies have all been about how my reaction is hurting you, not about how your actions hurt me." Elena had been quiet for a long moment. "You're right," she'd said finally. "Every apology has been about managing you, not about actually being sorry, because I think part of me still believed I was right, that you were a burden, that we were doing you a favor by letting you live here." "Elena," Travis had started. "No," she'd interrupted him. "Dad needs to hear this. I was ashamed of you, of your age, of your retirement, of the fact that you didn't have some impressive career or wealth to show off. My friends' parents were traveling the world, living in luxury condos, being successful in their retirement. And you were just here, reading books, watching TV, being normal." She'd looked at me with something that might have been understanding for the first time. "I measured your worth by all the wrong things," she'd said. "And I'm sorry, really sorry. Not sorry that you're charging rent. We deserve that. Sorry that we made you feel worthless when you've been anything but." I'd felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But something. "What about you?" I'd asked Travis. He'd shifted uncomfortably. "I thought you were taking advantage of us, living here for free while we struggled with bills. I didn't know. Elena never told me about all the money you'd put into this house. The down payment, the mortgage help, the renovations. She just said you'd helped out sometimes." He'd glanced at Elena, who'd had the grace to look ashamed. "If I'd known," he'd continued, "I would have, I don't know, treated you differently, respected what you'd done for us. Instead, I just saw an old man taking up space in my house. And I'm sorry for that." We'd sat in silence for several minutes. "Are you going to cancel the rent?" Elena had asked finally. "No," I'd said. Her face had fallen. "But," I'd continued, "I'm going to offer you a choice." They'd waited. "You can move out, find your own place, build your own life, or you can stay here and actually complete the property transfer we started 8 years ago. I'll sign the house over to you fully. No more joint ownership. It'll be yours." "What's the catch?" Travis had asked suspiciously. "No catch," I'd said, "but I'll need somewhere to live. So you'll need to either give me the downstairs bedroom rent-free for as long as I need it, or help me find and pay for a decent senior living apartment nearby." "That's it?" Elena had asked. "You'll give us the house?" "I never wanted the house," I'd said. "I wanted respect. I wanted to be treated like a person who mattered. If you can give me that, actually give me that, not just perform it, then the house is yours." "And if we can't?" Travis had asked. "Then you move out, and I sell this house to someone else," I'd said. "Your choice." They'd looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. "We'll complete the transfer," Elena had said, "and you can stay in the downstairs bedroom for as long as you need, rent-free, as family." "We'll need to put it in writing," I'd said. "So we're all clear about the terms." "Agreed," Travis had said. We'd sat there for another moment, the weight of the past week settling between us. "Can I ask you something?" Elena had said. "Would you actually have evicted us if we couldn't pay?" I'd thought about that question. "I don't know," I'd admitted. "Part of me wanted you to feel what it's like to lose everything. But another part of me..." I'd looked at my daughter, at the woman I'd raised, at the flawed human being who'd hurt me but who I still loved. Another part of me hoped we'd find a way here. She'd started crying again, but these tears were different. "I don't deserve you as a father," she'd whispered. "No," I'd agreed. "But you're stuck with me anyway." The property transfer had been completed within 2 weeks. Doug had handled all the paperwork, made sure everything was filed properly this time, and the house had officially become Elena and Travis's. I'd stayed in the downstairs bedroom, but the dynamics had shifted completely. They'd insisted on setting up a small kitchenette in my room so I could have independence. They'd asked my opinion on family decisions and actually listened to the answers. They'd included me in their lives not as a burden, but as family. The kids had been confused at first about why Grandpa had almost moved out, but Elena had sat them down and explained, in age-appropriate terms, that sometimes adults make mistakes and hurt each other, and the important thing is to learn and do better. My grandson had asked me if I was still mad at his mom. "Not mad," I'd told him. "Disappointed, but we're working on it." "Good," he'd said, because Mom cries a lot when she thinks about it. Elena and I had started having coffee together every Saturday morning. Just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. Rebuilding something that had been broken. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, still conversations where old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But there was effort now. Genuine effort. Travis had apologized again, more thoroughly, and had started treating me not just with respect, but with something approaching affection. He'd even started asking me about my career, about the work I'd done before retirement, actually curious about my life rather than dismissive of it. "You know what's funny?" he'd said one evening over dinner. "I spent years thinking you hadn't accomplished anything. But you worked in infrastructure management for 40 years. You literally built things that people use every day, roads, bridges, public facilities, and I sell software. My work disappears the moment someone upgrades to the next version." "Both are valuable," I'd said. "Maybe," he'd replied. "But one of us actually left a legacy that'll outlast them, and it wasn't me." Marcus had called a month after everything settled. "Dad," he'd said, "I'm proud of you." "For almost evicting your sister?" I'd asked with dark humor. "For standing up for yourself," he'd said. "For not letting them treat you like you were disposable. A lot of parents would have just accepted it, taken the abuse, convinced themselves they deserved it. You didn't. You demanded better. That took guts." "It took being hurt enough to finally act," I'd said. "Same thing sometimes," he'd replied. 6 months after the intervention, Elena had asked if we could talk privately. We'd gone for a walk in the neighborhood I'd helped her afford, in the house I'd helped her buy. "I've been thinking a lot," she'd said, "about what you said, about measuring worth by the wrong things." "I'm trying to be better," she'd continued. "I'm in therapy, trying to figure out why I became so obsessed with success and status." "Did you figure it out?" I'd asked. "Some of it," she'd said. "Mom died when I was 16, and I think I decided that if I could just be successful enough, I could somehow prove that her death didn't break us." "Your mother's death did break us," I'd said gently, "but we rebuilt. That's surviving. I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it, for dismissing you, for treating you like a burden when you were the reason I had everything." "I know," I'd said, "and I forgive you." "Do you regret it?" she'd asked. "The way you handled it?" "No," I'd said. "I regret that it was necessary, but the action itself? No. Sometimes people need to see consequences before they understand." "I understand now," she'd said, and I believed her.